Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the last module of the Human Resource Business Partner, which is entitled Action Planning and Business Simulation. I want us to, before we start, I want us to go back to where we started by looking at the modules that we have covered so far. On day one, that was on Wednesday, we covered module 1 and 2, where module 1 was strategic partnership, where we were discussing the play a role in attainment of the corporate strategies. In the afternoon of Wednesday, we covered module 2, and that was human resource strategy and organizational alignment. That in this module, we discussed the HR strategies based on the various HR functions. Sorry for the interruption. I was highlighting the modules that we have covered so far, starting with module 1 and 2, which we covered on Wednesday. And on Wednesday in the morning, we covered module 1, in which we discussed strategic HR partnership, where we were looking at how we can be partners in terms of the strategies of the organizations and how HR managers can be partners in this position. Secondly, we talked about HR strategy and organizational alignment, where we discussed the HR strategies with respect to recruitment, training, performance management, employee relations, and as well as compensation. Yesterday, it was on Thursday, we focused on module 3 and 4. And in module 3, we talked about HR analytics for impact, where we were looking at how HR managers can make informed decisions based on analytics. And these analytics are related to the HR functions, namely recruitment and selection, training and development, performance management, and compensation and reward. In the afternoon, we discussed stakeholder engagement, particularly stakeholder mapping, where we talked about the various types of stakeholders with which we work as HR partners and their interests in the organization. And then we also talked about leadership, where we were linking stakeholder engagement with the leadership. That as HR managers, we must take a leadership role in ensuring that the stakeholder interests are satisfied. Module 5, which we started with today in the morning, was on innovation, agility, culture, and change culture, where we say that innovation is creating new ideas, systems, processes, and even products. And in HR, we can be innovative in areas like recruitment, training, performance management, and among other areas. So we were talking about innovation, where we can innovate areas like recruitment and selection, training, performance management. So the basic idea behind innovation is to ensure that organizations satisfy their customers and are able to survive in the long term. Agility is about adaptation to changes in the environment, and we discussed how we can be agile in areas of policy, systems, processes, and procedures. And we ended with cultural change and our role as HR partners in leading this cultural change. So this afternoon, we are going to discuss action planning and business simulation. Talking of action planning, it's about the strategies and the changes that we have developed as business partners so that we implement them for results. And therefore, we are going to look at actions related to strategy so that we implement what has been formulated. As you can see, if I take us back, strategic partnership, HR strategy, HR analytics, stakeholder engagement, that from all this, there are action plans that we need to implement. So these action plans relate to strategy, culture, policy, processes, and systems, so that we can play our role effectively. And on business simulation, these are practical and real-world examples for purposes of learning, which we will look at. That as business partners, we need to simulate a real-life situation before the actual implementation. For example, we want to introduce a change in culture. So we need to simulate that so that, one, we have a clear idea on what is going to happen. Two, we bring on board the various stakeholders that we have mapped. And three, we create a collaboration platform in which we are going to implement our strategic plans, policies, procedures, and systems. In action planning, we are going to have two themes. One is the strategic planning and the human resource business partner action simulation, strategic planning. Like I may have indicated before, a strategy is a game plan of managing a business or achieving a competitive advantage. So as HR managers, we formulate plans, implement and review them. And then secondly, we are going to look at action simulation, where we will pick an example of a real life situation and try to find out solutions to the issues that are being raised by way of a simulation. And then secondly, we will be looking at peer coaching and feedback. That in partnership, we need to bring everybody on board so that they have the skills, the knowledge, and the abilities to play this partnership role. So in peer coaching, we are going to look at how we can learn from each other, especially from the more experienced and knowledgeable employees, so that one, we are able to formulate strategies, become good leaders, and perform our work effectively. And then secondly, with peer coaching, there is need for feedback. And the feedback can be categorized into two, though there will be more. One is positive feedback and two, negative feedback. Where positive feedback highlights areas of success with respect to peer coaching. And the negative feedback, the focus is on weaknesses which need to be addressed. Let us give an introduction to our topic, that is action planning and business simulation. So what do we understand by that? Action planning is a structured approach. It is a structured approach because it is systematic, that it has a beginning and an end. So when we talk about an action, it may relate to a strategy that has been formulated and therefore being implemented, or it could be a policy, or it could be a system, like the ones that we have talked about before. So there is a structured way of actioning the recommendations. For example, if it is culture, we start planning so that we can turn that culture change into measurable outcomes. So what goes into this planning? It includes one, establishment or identification of a need. Two, development or formulation of clear objectives. Three, identifying teams that will help in the implementation. Four, analysis of possible solutions that should be implemented in culture. Five is selecting the most suitable or the best solution that should be implemented. Next should be the implementation. And lastly is monitoring and evaluation. So action planning is a whole process where we put in place all the necessary requirements for implementation and review of the plans we have developed as business partners. When we talk of business simulation, this is a real life case or a modeling where we are identifying either challenges or opportunities that should be addressed or taken advantage of. So a simulation is an imitation of a real life situation. So we can imitate, for example, the use of ATS. So suppose we are using ATS, how are we going to implement this system? Then we talk of human resource business partner context. This is the environment in which we operate as business partners. So in this case, we are trying to connect HR strategies and objectives with actionable results or business results that we need to translate. And that is the keyword, translation of the human resource strategies or actions into business results. Then what's the purpose of action planning and business simulation? One is to strengthen alignment between HR and overall business performance. Strengthening. That when we do a HR analytics, which we discussed on Wednesday, we are intending to find areas of strength and areas of weakness, as well as opportunities for improvement. Where there are areas of weakness, we strengthen them. And that is where action planning comes in, that we develop actions around the areas of weakness. And when we implement or operationalize these action plans, we strengthen those areas of weakness in HR. What is the approach to action planning and business simulation? It combines planning, execution, and feedback. Where planning involves setting objectives, assembling resources, identifying alternative solutions to the areas of weakness, selecting the best solution, and then move to the next part, that is execution. So the learning approach is where we are combining planning, execution, and feedback. So execution is the implementation part, where we are talking about three things. One, assignment of duties in relation to our plans. Two, allocating resources so that we can actualize the plans. And three, monitoring progress so that we ensure that we stay on track. Then the next part is now the strategic planning and human resource business partner action simulation. I've just given an introduction to action planning. So what do we understand by strategic planning? One, strategic planning is a structured process of aligning HR initiatives with business strategy. A structured process. As I will discuss with us, strategy is a systematic process which starts with one, environmental analysis, where we are evaluating the various factors in our environment which are likely to affect the implementation of our strategies. The second one is to develop action plans based on the findings of the environment. That we will analyze the internal and external environment, and based on that, we formulate strategies that are likely to be implemented based on that environmental impact. And then once we have formulated strategies, we select the most appropriate strategy to be implemented. And then from the selection, we implement. After implementation, we monitor and review. So it is a structured process of formulating and implementing strategy. And these strategies must be aligned with the business strategy. For example, our strategy in recruitment and selection is to poach or raid other organizations that have the required human resource or the required talent. So if that is our strategy in recruitment, then that must be aligned with the business strategy. Why should we poach employees from other organizations? It is because we want to achieve, for example, innovation as a business strategy, to be innovative. So we bring on board innovative people through poaching. And then what is the purpose of strategic planning? Is to ensure that HR initiatives contribute directly to the long-term organizational success. And this means that as we formulate these strategies around HR initiatives, at the back of our mind, we are thinking about organizational success. That recruitment, training, performance management, compensation, and others should contribute to the long-term organizational success, excuse me. And how does success look like? I have mentioned this before, that a successful organization is one that is competitive, 2, has a larger market share, 3, is cost-effective in its operations, 4, generates revenues, 5, makes profits if it is a profit-making organization, and lastly, their customers are happy or satisfied. And this can only happen if we have the right number and the quality of employees in our organizations. And that can be brought about by formulating strategies around recruitment, around training, around performance. And these are the areas or HR initiatives. What is the focus of strategic planning? It is to identify priorities of our employees, 2, resource allocation, and 3, capability or capacity building. Earlier in the morning, we talked about personalization of certain initiatives, such as training, so that we can develop a high-performing workforce. So in strategic planning, we prioritize employee needs. What is this that they need in order to perform their work effectively or be productive? And in prioritizing this, we ensure that the employees are equipped with the relevant skills, knowledge, and abilities so that they can be productive. Secondly is resource allocation, where in strategic planning, we allocate resources to those priority areas. If our priority areas is to develop talent, which is innovative, then we allocate resources for that purpose. And the main resources that should be allocated are usually financial resources. And where human and physical resources are required, we should also allocate them. Then for capability building is where we are building the capacity of employees through the acquisition of new skills and knowledge. And how does that work? It is by mentorship, coaching, and training our employees so that we can build the capacity. And then another aspect of strategic planning in human resource business partnering is involvement. Yesterday, we talked about stakeholder mapping and the methods that we can use for them to participate in decision making. So in HR strategic planning, we ensure that all the stakeholders are brought on board and contribute their ideas, share their experiences, and also bring new insights. Through this collaborative effort, we are able to translate HR initiatives into strategic goals and outcomes. And then lastly, how do we understand strategic planning? It involves time horizons. There are usually 3 time horizons in strategic planning. 1, short term, 2, medium term, and 3, long term. The short and medium term tactics or strategies build onto the long term. So we are looking at both the short and the long term strategic planning, which may be between 1 year, which is short term, and 3 or 4 years, which is long term. I remember when we discussed strategic management in respect to human resource business partnership, in topic 1 or module 1, we said that strategy is a long-term plan, which can span between 2 and 5 years. And I also mentioned that most of our strategic plans are 5-year plans. But for others, they have either 3 or 2. While the 5-year plan, it is because we need to allow the strategies that have been formulated to be implemented. So those are the key aspects related to strategic planning in the context of human resource business partnership. Moving on, we want to look at the process of strategic planning. As I mentioned, that a strategy is a structured process. If you look at the definition, strategic planning is a structured process. So this process involves all the 6 key steps. 1 is environmental scanning, which means an evaluation or assessment of the internal and external factors that affect strategy formulation. Internal factors are those elements within an organization and which are under the control of managers, which can affect strategy formulation. So what are these examples of internal factors that can affect strategy planning? 1 is financial resources. And we have always said that for a strategy to be implemented or even formulated, we need financial resources. If these finances are not adequate, then we may not implement those strategies. For instance, in compensation and reward, we may want to increase the salaries of our employees so that we are competitive. And the strategy here is to attract and retain top talent. So how do we go about that? We increase salaries and also reward employees. This salary increment is a cost to the organization. So when we are looking at the internal resources, we assess whether these financial resources are capable of supporting the strategies that we intend to implement, such as attracting and retaining top talent through compensation. Secondly, is the leadership of the organization. As we discussed in the morning, the leaders determine the direction of the organization. even in terms of strategy. And we said that the leaders should be the drivers of change as well as culture. So if we are formulating strategies, the leader should be able to support us in terms of their own personal time, their commitment, and also resource allocation. So if the leadership of the organization is not supportive, then we may not be able to formulate and implement effective strategies. A third internal element is the organizational structure. A structure can support or impede the strategy formulation. How is this? Structures can be of two types. One, tall, hierarchical, and bureaucratic structures. And two, short and broad-based organizational structures. So when we look at this internal factor in the form of a structure, we will see which of those structures can help us to formulate and implement our strategies. A tall structure usually is very bureaucratic, meaning that there are many layers through which we have to go either for approval of our proposals or for support from the top management. And this can take a long time and can also be costly. Communication is also very slow because of the many layers or levels that we have to go through. So that becomes a factor that can affect strategy formulation. Another internal factor, which we discussed in the morning, is culture. Culture consists of three things. One, values. Two, norms. And three, beliefs. The values are the things that we consider to be important, such as innovation, such as integrity, such as transparency, and such as honesty. If these values are non-existent, even if we formulate good strategies, they may not be effective when it comes to implementation. And like I said, a bad culture eats strategy for breakfast. And how does it eat strategy? It's because of the behaviors and non-aligned values. So those are some of the internal factors that we need to consider as we formulate our strategies. I will repeat the internal factors. One is resources, particularly financial resources. Two, leadership of the organization. Three, organizational structure. And four, organizational culture. So these are internal factors which we have to analyze and find out how they affect our strategies. External factors are many. We can categorize these factors into two. One, the industry external factors. And two, the general external factors. Let me start with the first one, that is the industry factors. These are elements within the immediate or immediately outside the organization that affect operations of an organization. And these are industry factors. And all organizations operate within an industry or a sector. For example, education has its own players. Tourism has its own players. Agriculture has its own players. Manufacturing has its own players. So these are industry factors or players. And then who are these players in this industry? One, suppliers. Two, competitors. And three, customers. So these are industry factors that affect our strategy. For example, competitors. that whatever they do, we either respond by way of imitating, or two, by way of doing what they have done in a better way. So that affects strategy formulation. Secondly, when we talk of customers have their own needs. So we respond to the customer needs in terms of strategy related to recruitment, training, and others. So if a customer needs innovative products, then as HR managers, we must respond by bringing on board innovative employees through recruitment of innovation, through training people on innovation, through rewarding people who are innovative, because customers demand innovation. And then the last industry factor is the suppliers. And I had mentioned earlier that suppliers can influence our operations depending on three things. One, the quality of what they supply. Two, their delivery timelines. And three, the cost of what they are providing. So when formulating strategies, we look at the suppliers. And somebody can ask, who are the suppliers in human resource management? One, this could be consultants who could be supplying training services. Or two, it could be employment agencies who are supplying us with employees. So suppliers can also affect the way we formulate strategies, because whatever they give us, either of high quality, timely, or cost, will affect the way we formulate our strategies. Then let me move to the general environment, which is also external. This is the political, economic, social, and technological factors. Today we are talking about elections in Tanzania, and we have witnessed violence in some of the towns in Tanzania. Businesses have been closed, and those businesses can be affected for a long time depending on the damage caused. And that means that our strategies may be affected if our businesses have been affected by the political factors such as instability. The second general aspect is the economy. An economy may be performing or declining or stagnating. So if the economy is not performing, organizations look for ways of cutting costs. From a HR perspective, we cut costs in two ways. One, freezing training, and two, retrenchment. There could be other ways in which we can contain cost in a hard economic environment, but those are the main two. And that affects our strategies. For example, in our human resource plan, we had projected that we hire more employees. But because the economic environment is not performing, we end up retrenching instead of recruiting. So we formulate other strategies because of emergent issues like declining economies. Another factor is social and technological. Let me talk about technology. And this is what we discussed in the morning, that technology enables us to do our work faster and more cost effectively. When we automate certain processes, it means that we are eliminating the human element. And when this happens, it means that we have to scale down on the number of employees that we have. And therefore, through technology, we are able to formulate strategies either to train our employees to acquire technological skills, or two, to reduce the numbers because some of the jobs have been automated. The second step in strategic planning is goal setting. So we set measurable human resource objectives. And this brings us to the concept of SMART objectives. They should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, SMART. So when we are formulating HR objectives, we think about the various HR functions like recruitment. We formulate an objective in recruitment. Training, we formulate an objective in training. Performance, we formulate an objective there. Compensation, formulate an objective. Employee retention, formulate an objective. For instance, in recruitment, we need to define specific objectives. For example, reduce the time taken to hire employees by 20%. That is a specific objective. Only the time aspect is missing. So we can say reduce the time of hiring by 10% in the second quarter of 2026. Second quarter of 2026. So how SMART is our objective? It is specific because we are talking about cutting on the amount of time used in recruitment. Time. We are specific, it's about time. Measurable, time is measurable. And we have also mentioned reducing the time by 20%. That is our measure. 3, attainable. Is that objective attainable given the resources? Yes, it can be attainable. And then realistic. How realistic is it to reduce the time taken in recruitment? It is realistic because we can automate the recruitment and selection process so that we reduce it by 20%, if not more. Then lastly, is it time-bound? Yes, it is time-bound because we have said that they should be implemented by the second quarter of 2026. So ladies and gentlemen, goal setting should be measurable, should be realistic and time-bound. Then after setting our objectives, then we formulate strategies. And in formulation of strategies, we are talking about the whole scope of talent management, where we are talking about attracting talent, developing talent, utilizing talent, and retaining talent. So when we talk about attracting that talent, that goes to recruitment and selection. So we formulate a strategy in recruitment and selection, for example, automating the process. In training, we want to enhance our employee competencies so that they can be innovative. So if that is an objective for employee development or talent development, then we formulate a strategy like mentorship, coaching, delegation, or we can train people. And then on employee retention, because that is part of talent management, we want to retain employees. What are the strategies for retention? 1 is career development. 2 is succession planning. 3, competitive rewards. And 4 is involvement and consultation. Those are options in talent retention. And then once we have identified all the strategies and prioritize, then the next step is to implement those strategies. By implementing, we are executing them or operationalizing them. How do we operationalize this? It is through programs like training, policies like recruitment and selection, as well as performance frameworks such as 360-degree appraisal. So we implement through these policies, programs, and performance frameworks. So in the actual execution, what is required? One is resource allocation. Two, assignment of duties so that we know who is responsible. And three, monitoring progress so that we know where we are going wrong and take corrective actions in time. Then after implementing that strategic plan, it could be automation, it could be succession planning or a succession, or it could be career. We now evaluate. Evaluate is to monitor the result or measure the outcomes. So if it is automation of recruitment and selection, we monitor or measure the effectiveness of the automation. And we can use KPIs, that's key performance indicators, analytics, or business performance data. So what are the KPIs and analytics that can be related to automation? One is the cost of recruitment. And two is the time taken for hire. Those are KPIs. And when it comes to analytics, this is the number, percentage, or frequency associated with automation. So we are talking about numbers like cost, that the cost of recruitment has reduced by 50%. That becomes an analytic or a metric that we can use to make decisions going forward. And then the last step in strategic planning is adjustment. That during evaluation, we may find that we are not attaining the results. And therefore, we go to adjustment where we are improving areas of weakness and maintaining areas of strength. And when there are new changes in the market, we adapt. We talked about agility and change in the morning. So we adapt to change is sorry for that hitch. So we were talking about adjustments based on changes in our environment. And I said that when you analyze the environment in terms of strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, we are able to identify those opportunities which we can take advantage of. So that is the process of strategic HR planning. Next, we look at the purpose of strategic planning. Why do we need to engage in strategy in the context of business partnership? One is to set the direction for the organization, and particularly in human resource department. So it provides a clear vision and roadmap. Vision is where we ought to be or we should be. A roadmap is how we should get there. So in strategic planning, we have a strategy which gives us the direction or the vision, and the roadmap, that is the strategies that will get us into the direction that we want. So through HR strategy planning, we are able to develop a clear vision and a roadmap on how we are going to achieve our strategies. Remember, we are talking about action planning as a topic. That when we formulate those strategies, we develop an action plan. So that action plan becomes the roadmap, and the strategy becomes the vision. Secondly, it helps in integrating HR strategy with business strategy. And that is basically alignment. That in people strategy, we are talking about recruitment strategies, training strategies, performance management strategies, compensation strategies, employee relations strategies, among others. So when we formulate strategies or we develop strategic plan, they should be aligned with the corporate business goals. For instance, a business goal could be to open branches in foreign markets, that is growth, grow into foreign market by the year 2027. And then in human resource strategy, we think how we can enable the organization move into this foreign market. So what is required? Employees in the foreign market. 2, what is required? Resources in this foreign market. 3, what is required is compensation of people in this foreign market. 4, what is required? Performance management of employees in the foreign market. 5 is employee relations in the foreign market. And that requires strategy. So if we are opening an office in any of the regions in Africa, we think recruitment. So we think about recruitment strategy, either to recruit people from the host country or recruit people from the parent country or recruit people from a third country so that we can have people working in the foreign market. And in terms of training, we want to ensure that the people we send into these foreign markets understand the culture, the environment, and also the legal system. And therefore, as a strategy in recruitment, we hire people who have international experience, not just anybody. And if we cannot get them, we train people. We train people so that they can occupy those foreign offices. And that is the meeting point between HR strategy and business goals. They must be aligned. And then purpose number 3 is to prioritize. That when we are formulating strategy, if I may take us back to what we said in the process, bullet 3 or step 3 is strategy formulation. We develop strategic plans related to talent management. And I said talent management is about attracting. So we formulate strategies to attract. 2, development. We formulate strategies for development. And 3, retention, we formulate strategies for retention. And then when it comes to prioritization, we look at those strategies that have the greatest impact on organizational performance. These include and consultation, 3, career development, and 4, succession planning for purposes of promoting employees to higher positions. Employees, when promoted, are likely to remain in the organization. So that becomes a priority in strategy. If it is training, we look at the strategies in training that have the greatest impact. If coaching and mentorship have a direct impact, so we prioritize that. And then another purpose is to ensure optimal resource allocation. That through this, we are able to achieve efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency in the utilization of our finances, which is our budget, efficiency in talent, who are our employees, and efficiency in technology when we adopt new technologies. In budgets, we look for ways of cutting on human resource costs related to recruitment, training, reward, compensation, health and safety, among others. So we have to look at our budget and ensure that we optimize on that budgetary resource. Then on talent, these are the employees. How many employees do we have? Are they enough? Or are they excess? Or are they few? If they are few or they are excess, there are consequences. For example, we have few employees. It means that we don't have enough people to perform certain tasks. And because of that, there is a likelihood of burnout and stress. And if we have excess, then the staffing costs will increase, particularly costs related to compensation and the costs related to training. So we must have the right talent that we should allocate during strategic planning. And then lastly, on resource allocation is technology, that we must deploy the right technologies. For example, in the training, we use LMS. In the recruitment, we use ATS. In performance management, we use PMS. Or in record management, we use DMS, that is a document management system. So if we have to succeed in our strategic planning, we must deploy technology, the right technology for the right initiatives. And then the other part is measurement. So it is meant as people of retirement. So in strategic management, like we said, and I take us back what we mentioned in the process, evaluation on point number 5, evaluation. So we are able to measure the performance of each of those strategies. And then lastly is to ensure organizational sustainability by way of formulating strategies around human resource functions. And in this way, we can make our organizations adapt flexibly to changes in our environment. Allow me to quickly remind us what we discussed today in the morning. We talked about agility, we talked about culture change, and innovation. Innovation, agility, and culture change. I want to zero in on agility, which means quick adaptation to changes in the environment. That our strategic plans must adapt to changes. They should not be rigid. So after measurement of those strategies and finding out how they are working, then we can modify the strategies or change them so that we are responding to the changes in the environment. And again, I take us back to the last point where I said adjustment, adapting plans. And that is what is contained in sustainability, that we can only be sustainable if we are agile. Agile in our policies, agile in our processes, and agile in we don't. Hello, then. So we develop programs that we don't evaluate for effectiveness. So what do? We now identify the objective, that is evaluation of the effectiveness of training. And then what are the steps or the activities to evaluate? One is to collect data, 2, analyze data, and 3, interpret the data. So data analysis, data collection, data analysis, and data interpretation in relation to the effectiveness of training. And then once we have identified the activities, then we find or we look for the person responsible. So we assign responsibility. For instance, in recruitment, we are automating. Who is responsible for automation? In this case, 2 people. 1, the HR manager, and 2, the ICT manager. So that when it comes to accountability, we have these 2 people we look up to for answers. Another component is the timeline. How much time do we give for these activities to be performed completely? So if activities are longer, we give more time. If they are shorter, we allocate less time. So what are the timelines? And again, remember, when we are setting our objectives, they should be SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, the timelines. And then another component is the resources. What are the resources required to automate recruitment and selection? So we talk about financial resources. 2, software or technology. And 3, expertise. These are the people to implement that system. Lastly is measurement, that in an action plan, we should find out how we are going to determine the outcomes. And in most cases, we use KPIs. And what is the KPI in automation? It could be reduction in recruitment and selection process, reduction of time, or reduction of cost. So it is time reduction and cost reduction. That is how we are going to measure the effectiveness of the action plan, and that is of automating recruitment. Our next part is the process of action simulation process. One is to create a scenario which should be as realistic as possible. For example, I can say company XYZ is a medium-sized ICT company which has been in existence for the last 3 years. This company is facing challenges in hiring the right quality of employees, and the staff that have been hired, most of them have left. The management of this company is concerned that they are going to close shop if nothing is done about this situation. And then we are asked, develop or identify the challenges facing the organization, develop actions or strategies to address the challenges, And 3, develop an action plan. You see, that is a hypothetical case where a company is facing challenges in recruitment and that most of its employees are leaving. So as HR managers, we simulate this by identifying the challenges. So what could be the problem with the recruitment? Perhaps they don't have qualified staff, or perhaps are hiring the wrong people. And then could be the effect of this staff turnover. So employees are leaving the organization. And then we are asked, what strategies can we recommend to improve the situation? So one of the strategies is to automate the hiring process. Another strategy could be hiring qualified employees. And another strategy could be onboarding the employees effectively. And then on retention, the strategy could be career development, 2, competitive compensation, and 3, involvement and consultation. Then the next part in action simulation is how do we develop actionable plans? So again, we go to the components, we develop a template. Template as in our table, where column 1 is objectives, column 2 is activities, column 3 is responsibilities, column 4 is the timeline, column 5 is resources, column 6 is measurement. And then we look at the action plans. So those action plans should be contained in a table or a template. Then secondly is role assignment, that after formulating the strategies, now we should allocate roles to people who are qualified for purposes of implementation. For instance, we have said in recruitment and selection, there are several strategies. 1, automation. In terms of role assignment, who will be involved? Perhaps HR manager and ICT. We have also said induction or onboarding. Who is involved or who should be assigned this role? It's the HR manager and the HR officer. In retention, staff retention, we have proposed several strategies. So when we are assigning roles, one of the strategies we said is developing a competitive salary and reward structure or system. Who should be assigned this role? This could be HR manager and finance. Why HR? Because they have data on market rates. Why finance? They will tell us on the ability of the organization to pay. So role assignment is important because we know who is responsible for those action plans. Then the third thing or third stage is decision stage, where the teams evaluate data, discuss options, and choose strategic options. And this is for impact. And impact is created by people being brought together through collaboration platforms so that they can discuss those options. The next step is to implement. And in the action simulation, we implement by way of allocating resources, assigning duties, and monitoring progress. After that, we reflect in this simulation What are the lessons learned from this exercise? Was it simple or was it complex? Was it insightful or was it not? Has it prepared the participants adequately to conduct a strategy, formulation and implementation or not? Then lastly, we get feedback through debriefing, where we get to know how we are performing. And this is the work of a facilitator like myself. If I gave you an exercise to simulate an organization, so I'll give you feedback based on your presentation that you did well in this area. This area was not well done, and what opportunities are there for improvement. What are the key features of business action simulation? As I said, it must be as possible. Allow me to go back. If you look at the last bullet on learning model, that a simulation is grounded on realistic business problem solving, realistic, something that exists, not something out there in space. Realism is very important because it makes the simulation more authentic and that we deal with the real business problems or issues. Interactivity, we said that again, if I may go back, it is an interactive process. If we look at the process, that all people are brought on board so that they can work together. If you look again at the last bullet, the learning model, experiential and interactive. So this process enables people to work together through collaboration, through negotiation, and through strategic reasoning, so that everybody can bring their ideas onto the table, discuss those ideas. Yesterday, we talked about strategic discussions or conversations. Strategic conversations. So through these interactions, people are able to interact strategically. Thirdly, another feature is creating a free environment where employees are able to express themselves freely without the fear of punishment, or are free to experiment new ideas, experimentation. That in a simulation, we are not restricting people. We are not threatening people. We are here to create a scenario where everybody can bring their ideas for purposes of experimentation and discussion. The other one is feedback. We said that one of the components of business simulation is feedback. We get to know how we did. And again, if I may go back a little bit, I said here, in point number 6, the facilitator provides feedback. And therefore, this process is feedback driven so that the participants know exactly what was expected of them, their areas of weakness and strength, and what needs to be done going forward. Second last is cross-functional view. Just like in bullet 2, we are bringing people from different departments. What are we trying to do in this cross-functional view? It is to break silos where each department is doing their own things. But when we bring people from different together, then we are able to bring on board their ideas or their strategies, and that will ensure business success. And then lastly is data. As we discussed yesterday, HR analytics is about data. And for us to play our role as business partners, we must always have a data-driven mindset. And this provides evidence on the basis of which we can make decisions. What's an example of this simulation? And this is a scenario. If you look at the process of simulation, step 1 is scenario creation. And on this slide, I've created a scenario, though it is in one sentence. So the scenario here is that an organization is conducting a restructuring process after a merger and a leadership transformation. So there are 3 key aspects. 1, restructuring. 2, mergers. And 3, leadership transformation. That when 2 or more companies come together and form one big company, you call that a merger. And when 2 companies come together, several things can happen. One of which is replication of roles. That one company had marketing and another one had marketing. Company had human resource and then the other one had human resource. So when they merge, those functions may overlap. So what happens? There is a need for restructuring. If you remember what I said in the morning about restructuring, it's about 3 things. 1, changing the organizational structure to form a different structure after the merger. 2, it could be reviewing the roles, giving them different names after the merger. And then 3 is rationalization of human resources in terms of numbers, qualifications, and performance. So when 2 companies are merging, there is a likelihood of having excess staff. And when we have excess staff, we restructure by way of redundancy and retrenchment. So that is the scenario we are painting here. And then with the merger, there is a transformation of leadership. That these 2 companies had their own leaders. And after the merger, there is need for new leadership. So there is a conversation about leadership related to this board of directors, related to the CEOs or MDs, related to the senior management and others. So that is a scenario which can be simulated. And then the objective. The participants are expected to identify interventions related to this scenario. And these interventions are HR in nature. And we have seen in the scenario here that after a merger, the scenario is that there is going to be duplication. So in HR terms, what are the interventions for duplication? 2, in a merger, the structure is also going to be affected. So we are going to look at redesigning of roles. So in HR terms, we are talking about job redesigning. And then after a merger, we have said that there is going to be duplication of roles. So in HR terms, we are going to look at demand and supply. And here we have oversupply of employees, because these are two different companies coming together and they have to create one structure. There will be duplications. If duplications are there, in HR terms, we consider some positions redundant. And if we cannot find places for redeployment, we retrench. So in terms of HR intervention, we retrench. But again, we should be careful when we are retrenching so that we don't lose talent. When we retrench, there are options. One, we can use first in, first out. Two, last in, first out. Or three, voluntary exit, or in some cases, forced exit. When employees voluntarily want to leave, and these are our talent, top talent, we have an option not to accept the exit so that we can retain them. Another aspect in role playing, rather in simulation, is role play. And the role play comes with what we said, assignment of duties, and I can take us back. Step 2, role assignment. So we have created a scenario, we have an objective, and then step 3 is now to assign roles so that there is a role play. This role play is simulated, that we put people or participants in groups and they are able to discuss this scenario and come up with strategic interventions. And then what will be the task? The tasks to be performed in these simulations. One is the 2, formulation of strategies, and 3, presentation of action plan. So the participants in a learning environment are expected to analyze data. And in our case, they will be analyzing data related to mergers and transformational or leadership transformation. Then secondly, they propose strategies related to restructuring after the merger and the leadership transformation. What strategies do we have? And then after that, they present their findings. Lastly, in action simulation is decision making. That after making those proposals, those are the strategies, we prioritize. On what basis are we going to prioritize? One, the impact of the strategy. 2, the risks involved. So if the impact is high and the risks are high, then we prioritize. But if the risks are low and the impact is low, then we can afford to ignore. So ladies and gentlemen, that is an example of action simulation, where we create a scenario, develop objectives, assign roles, then perform tasks, and lastly, make decisions based on priority. Before we take a break, perhaps we can go back and look at what we have covered so far. We were talking about the concept of action planning. Concept of action planning. 2, we talked about components of an effective action plan. 3, we talked about process of action planning or simulation. 4, features of simulation. And 5, we talked about the example. So we can respond to what we have discussed by way of asking a question or making a comment. Anybody with a comment or a question? From my end, I can see Lois. Lois, go ahead if you have a question or a comment to make. Okay, presumably, Lois does not have a question, and therefore we go to the second part of our discussion this afternoon, and that is peer coaching and feedback. By way of introduction, let me say that coaching is a process through which experienced and expert employees impart skills and knowledge to novices. Novices are people who are not experienced or new ones. They impart skills, knowledge, and competencies so that they can improve their performance. And therefore, by its own nature, coaching is an interactive process conducted within a specific period of time where the coach trains employees on how to perform a task from beginning to end. And therefore, it is specific. As I will mention shortly, coaching can be on communication. So the experts in communication will train their employees on how to communicate effectively, either through oral or written means. It could be another area like leadership. So our peers can coach us on leadership. And what are the elements of leadership? 1 is the vision, 2 is inspiration, 4 is motivation, and 4 is strategy formulation. So we can be coached in leadership, specifically in relation to motivation, 2, strategy formulation, and 3, interpersonal skills. So peer coaching is one of the methods that we use to acquire skills and knowledge within an organization. And as I said, coaching focuses on a specific area of performance. And this area is where an employee is not performing. Now we can go to the concept of peer coaching. And here I've said that this is a collaborative relationship. And that's why I said it is a relational process. Collaborative, where colleagues who are more experienced support others who are less experienced or knowledgeable so that they can achieve personal or professional growth. Colleagues working together collaboratively to support each other. Excuse me. The objective of peer coaching is to encourage reflection, skill improvement, and accountability. Reflection because we have to think of our current status, how we are doing things, and how best we can improve. So we reflect. Secondly is skill development, where the coach imparts skills on the specific areas of performance. Where an employee is weak, for example, in an area like performance, so the coach trains the employee on how to perform well. Another objective is to ensure accountability through shared learning, that the coach and the coachee work together on an assignment and each of them is accountable for results. Then the other concept related to coaching is frequency. That coaching can be conducted on a regular basis depending on. And again, because coaching is time-bound, we should be careful not to repeat this coaching on a regular basis because it can become boring. So we can say that a person can be coached on a specific area, say 2 months of intensive coaching. Within the 2 or 3 months, the employee should be able to improve their performance. But again, because of the need for continuous learning, we coach people on a regular basis, especially those who do not perform well or because of the changes in our environment. Then what are the focus areas, which I will discuss briefly in the next few minutes? The focus areas could be leadership. So we are coached on leadership. 2, communication, how we can effectively communicate. And 3, problem solving. How do we solve problems? First of all, we must identify clearly the problem. 2, we must the problem in terms of causes and effect. 3, we develop alternative solutions to the problem. 4, we select the most appropriate solution. 5, we implement the selected solution. And lastly, we review the solution. So problem solving is not just a one-off thing, it's a whole process. And therefore, during coaching, employees can be taught how to solve problems. And the problems may arise from any angle, say recruitment and selection, we need to solve problems. Performance management, we need to solve problems. Or customer complaints, we need to solve that problem. Then what's their out coaching? 1 is teamwork, where the coach and the coachee work together. 2, it motivates people because they acquire new skills and knowledge to perform their work better. And 3, it promotes a learning culture that through coaching, we are able to learn as new employees or novices. And again, as I promised, if you look at the focus areas on bullet 4, these are now the areas of P. 1 is leadership coaching, and the focus here is on decision-making, emotional intelligence, strategic vision, delegation, adaptability, and accountability. So we can be coached on decision-making, which I mentioned, emotional intelligence on how we can manage our own emotions as well as the emotions of others. Successful leaders are those who are emotionally intelligent. We do not become emotional and ask others to hack employees to death. That's being emotional. There are many emotions that all of us have: the emotion of anger, the emotion of frustration, the emotion of sadness, especially when we lose our beloved ones, the emotion of frustration. How we manage these emotions by our own makes the difference between leaders and non-leaders. So we can be coached on emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence has to do with the 4 components. 1, self-awareness of our emotions. 2, self-control, controlling our emotions. 3, social awareness, that is being aware of other people's emotions. 4, social management or control, where we control the emotions of others. For instance, if you find 2 people fighting, they are highly emotional. So how do you go about managing their emotions? So we can be coached on how to do that. In terms of strategizing, we can be coached on how to strategize in areas like recruitment, training, and compensation. The second area is peer, that is communication coaching, where we are saying that as managers, we must be able to communicate effectively. And some of the elements of communication include listening, clarity in terms of expression or language. 3, persuasion. Are we able to persuade others? 3, empathy. Are we able to communicate with empathy? 4, feedback. Are we able to give timely and accurate feedback? And lastly, communication. Those are all elements falling under communication. Then another area is problem solving, which I mentioned briefly. So we must be taught through coaching, analytical reasoning, creativity, critical thinking, innovation, and resilience. Another area is performance enhancement, where we should be taught on how to set SMART objectives or goals. 2, how to motivate employees in performance management. 4, how to measure productivity. 5, time management. Many of us are not very good at time management. We allow procrastination. We want to do many things at the same time, or we allow interruptions. So during coaching, we should be taught how to manage our time in terms of procrastination, how we should not procrastinate. Things that should be done now should be done now. There's no room for procrastination. If you procrastinate, the issues will accumulate and they become a crisis. And that is because of poor time management. Then teamwork and collaboration. We can be taught or coached on how to work as a team. And the specific aspects related to teamwork include building trust. That when you promise your team something, please deliver on your promise. Cooperation, shared accountability, team dynamics, and conflict management are all related to teamwork. That when 2 or more people are working together, there is bound to be conflict. And this conflict must be managed. And that is an area of coaching, conflict management. And lastly is change management, which we talked about in the morning, although in relation to culture. We change many things like change policy, we change systems. So in terms of coaching, we should focus on managing transitions. How do we manage change? For example, change in technology, that we are transitioning from manual to automated system. So we can be coached on that. 2, agility or adaptability. 3, communication during change. And 4, resilience under conditions of uncertainty. That change brings about uncertainty if it is not communicated well. So in coaching, we can have the benefit of coaches training us on how to manage resilience under conditions of uncertainty. Then what's the process of peer coaching? The first thing that we do when we meet or when we are partnered is to set goals. Set goals in relation to these areas: leadership, communication, problem solving, performance, and change management. So we set goals related to those areas, and these goals must be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And again, if I may take us back, for example, goals in leadership. So our first goal is to enhance decision-making. Our second goal is to improve emotional intelligence. Our third goal is to be capable of formulating strategies. Our fourth goal is ability to delegate. So that should be the goal or specific areas in which we can set goals on leadership. Secondly, after setting goals, we set the ball rolling. and we do observation. As a coach, we need to observe how the coachee is performing. Observe the actions, you observe the decisions, you observe the behaviors in relation to these areas like leadership, communication, problem solving. So you observe actions, you observe decisions, you observe behaviors. And then after that, we reflect. And again, if I may take us back, we said that in coaching, it involves reflection. And that also includes the area of action simulation, reflection, where we look at what has happened, how it has happened, where, and by whom. If you look at point number 5 on the process of action planning, and in coaching, we are in the process of actualizing the objectives. So we look at a reflection, analyzing the results and the lessons. So in coaching, under this process, we are looking at observing the employees, how they are performing in terms of actions, decisions, and behaviors, and then reflect by discussing what has worked and what has not, and potential areas of improvement or growth. And these potential areas could relate to any of this. If it is communication, and the objectives were set around active listening, clarity of communication, persuasion. So we again discuss what has worked in active listening and what has not, what has worked in clarity and what has not, what has worked in empathy and what has not, and then look at areas of improvement or growth. Thirdly is feedback sharing, that the coach provides feedback to the coachee. And this feedback must be balanced. I'll be talking about feedback in the next few minutes. That a balanced feedback is one that talks about both the strengths and the weaknesses of the coachee. Only on weaknesses, then we become biased as if the employee has not done anything. Then it should be specific. And again, depending on the area, again, I take us back. For example, problem solving. The feedback should be specific in relation to analytical thinking, creativity, critical thinking, or innovation. Specific. You give feedback on those specific areas that the employee was being coached on. And then timely, do not wait until it's too late. That's when you are giving feedback to the employee. The employees need to perform their work. That's why timely feedback is important. If there is a delay, they will continue performing poorly. Then action planning. Earlier on, we talked about action planning, where we are saying that in areas that need improvement, we develop an action plan. And in this action plan, we have these columns. Column 1, the area of improvement. Column 2, the actions recommended. Column 3, the person responsible. Column 4, the resources required. And column 5, the timelines. That is when we shall make this process action. And then lastly, follow up on the implementation of those plans. So if there was a plan to improve performance, for example, goal setting, you have coached your coachee on goal setting, you have coached them on productivity, and then you have set an action plan, you have implemented that action plan. So the next thing is to follow up. What is the progress so far so that we ensure that we are continuously improving? Then what is the role of feedback in peer coaching? One, it enables us to get clarifications on areas that we do not understand. or areas of weakness. Secondly, it promotes learning. So it catalyzes learning or encourages reflection and continuous learning. That when we are given feedback on areas of weakness or areas of strength, then we learn from those weaknesses and we learn from our strengths. And it's also motivating that when we get, for example, positive feedback, it motivates. Even if it's negative, we should take those negative feedback in our stride. It's not a criticism, but a lesson to be learned. And then feedback helps us to support. It supports the coaches so that they are able to improve in areas of weakness. So the coach is there to support the employee. And lastly, through coaching, we empower employees. Empowerment through acquisition of new skills and knowledge from the coaches. What are the types of feedback? I mentioned there are many. One of them is positive feedback, where we are emphasizing on strengths, and this motivates employees. And that is why I said earlier here in the slide here, where we said it motivates, it reinforces positive behaviors. And if that is the case, when we give for the positive feedback, it motivates employees. And then developmental feedback, where we are identifying areas of improvement or growth. And these are areas of weakness. And then if the employees can adjust, then they can perform well. Then there is another one called formal feedback, which is structured, like the topic, the body, the findings, and the conclusions. That's a formal feedback, which should be encouraged because this forms part of our record, especially when it comes to PIP, that is performance improvement programs. If we have to support our employees through coaching so that they can improve their performance, such a formal feedback can go a long way in helping us to build our evidence so that in case we dismiss this employee, there is already evidence that there was coaching, these were the results, and this was the conclusion. Informal feedback is where we are having informal discussions or spontaneous meetings where we can share our ideas and insights on a daily basis. And in other cases, especially in performance management, we use 360-degree feedback, where we get feedback from multiple sources. For example, after coaching, the employees should go back to their areas or positions of operation, and we should get feedback on how they are performing after coaching. So we can get feedback from several other sources. And then feed-forward approach, this focuses on the future, that what are the next steps? That having been coached, having acquired these skills and knowledge, having improved in these areas, what are the next steps? Focus on future possibilities instead of past mistakes. So we don't focus on the past. The past is gone. We can only learn lessons from the past, and therefore we move forward. What is the benefit of peer coaching? One of the most important benefits is feedback exchange, which we have just talked about. 2, we create a learning culture through coaching because the coach and the coachee interact and learn. Trust building because a coach creates a relationship. That interpersonal relationship helps employees to integrate easily into the organization and work with others. Another benefit is empowerment, where employees are empowered to make decisions because they have acquired new skills, new knowledge, and new abilities. Another benefit is collaboration, that coaching is a relational process where two or more people are brought together and work as a team. So peer coaching promotes teamwork, and this teamwork enables people to learn. And lastly is retention, that when people are coached, they acquire new skills and knowledge. They become more satisfied with their employees, with their jobs rather, and they become more engaged. And that promotes employee retention. What are the challenges in peer coaching? Before we close, one is biasness, where the coach may be subjective, probably jumping into conclusions about the coachee. The other one is defensiveness, where the coachee, that is the person being coached, defends their position and arguing, no, it is not like that. So being defensive does not help. It's advisable that when you are being coached and a weakness is being pointed out, please accept and move on. Time limitation, because coaching is time bound, we may have 2 weeks, 1 week, or 2 months. And because the coaches also have their work schedules, the time schedules can be a limitation. And therefore, we should work within the limited time by ensuring that we cover all the areas within the limited time. If need be, we can ask for an extension if it does not work the first time. Skill gaps, especially on the part of coaches. These skills relate to giving feedback and also the coaching skills. Coaching skills include communication, listening, and also supporting. If the coaches do not have these skills, then the effectiveness of the coaching program is affected. Another one is trust issues, where the coach and the coachee do not trust each other, and that there's no honest feedback is given. The last one is organizational culture, where coaching is not encouraged because of the structure, where there are fears that after being coached, the employee may take over from their positions. And this can discourage coaching, particularly open dialogue between the coach and the coachee. What are the best practices in peer coaching so that we can wind up? One, set clear objectives from the beginning. And that is this in terms of steps. We look at this process of coaching. Goal setting. Set clear goals. That is our best practice. Another best practice is establish ground rules, such as timekeeping, confidentiality, respect, and participation. That if the employees do not participate in this process of coaching, the coaching fails. So from the beginning, we should establish ground rules on confidentiality, that whatever is being discussed should remain between the coach and the coachee. Another best practice is to use a structured session where the coach meets. For the first time, they set objectives, set timelines, and agree on a schedule. In the next session, they will review what was discussed, what has been done, and in the next session, what needs to be done. So the employee is given assignments to go and do, so that when they come back for another session, they have something to report. That is a structured session. And then second last is balanced feedback. And again, I'll go back to feedback to look at types of feedback. One is positive, developmental, formal, informal, and feed forward. So as a best practice, we can combine these feedbacks so that there is a balance. Where there are strengths, we praise them, that is positive. Where there are weaknesses, we propose developmental feedback. And where there is need for futuristic thinking, we propose prescriptive feedback, or what we have called feed forward. Then lastly, under best practice, second last rather, is track progress so that we know how we are performing during the coaching or even after coaching. And then lastly, encourage reflection. Reflection on what has been done, how it has been done, when, and by whom. And this ensures continuous improvement. What are the principles of effective peer coaching? So that we can finish. One is equality, that both partners are equal. That's why they are called peers. There's nobody who is senior than the other. Two, confidentiality, which is one of the principles, that anything that has been discussed between the coach and the coachee should not be shared with others unless with consent. Constructive dialogue, there should be no criticisms or finger pointing. Commitment, both the coach and the coachee should be committed to this process in terms of time allocation, in terms of doing assignments. Empathy is another principle, that the coach should put himself or herself in the shoe of the coachee. And through this empathy, there's understanding, there's emotional connection. And lastly, under coaching, we focus on actions. Actions, actions, actions. Because through actions, we produce positive outcomes or positive outputs. So without action, it fails. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our interaction this afternoon. And I now want to invite questions. Now this is the question and answer session. Please ask your question, make your comment so that we can close. So any question? Lois, if you have a question, please ask your question. Anybody who has a comment to make, please go ahead. Okay. There is no question or comment to make. I want to thank you very much once again for your participation, for your contribution, and for your patience. And with that, we effectively come to the end of our interactions since Wednesday. For those of us who have attended all the lessons, you will get a certificate on Certified Human Resource Business Partner. For those of us who attended particular modules, you will get a certificate on that particular module, and you will get your one CPD. For those of us who attended all of them, you are guaranteed of 6 CPD points. And with that, I want to wish you God's grace until we meet again. Bye for now.